More than 5 decades later, the resting place of Audie Murphy, the most decorated American war hero of World War II and subsequent Hollywood legend, finally opened, revealing secrets no one ever anticipated. His grave had remained intact for 54 years, an unspoiled monument to gravesite sanctity, where fans came to ponder courage and sacrifice. But what came to light in early 2025 amazed historians, fans, and the rest of the world. The discoveries not only defied centuries-old assumptions about his life and death but also sparked new controversies rich in mystery, wonder, and incredulity. What was discovered appeared strong enough to reverse everything we believed we knew about Audie Murphy. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. It started quietly, like any other upkeep project at Arlington National Cemetery. In January 2025, authorities made what they called a routine restoration of Audie Murphy's grave. Initially, it seemed like a preservation issue, fixing eroded stone, shoring up the earth, keeping the area open to the millions who tour Arlington annually. But rumors began circulating among employees. The secrecy of the project was unusual. No cameras were permitted, no journalists were notified, and the whole restoration was carried out under close military supervision. As digging was deeper than usual, something unusual came to the surface, an old metal container, never documented in cemetery records and years buried. It contained 3 surprising things. The first was Murphy's worn combat division insignia, intact after all those years underground. The second was an enigmatic medal, one not officially known by any recognized medal, with odd symbols that could not be explained easily. And the third, and most surprising of all, was a letter by hand signed by Audie Murphy himself. It seemed to be a personal letter, maybe a goodbye to his wife and children or an introspection penned on the verge of his death. But as officials and historians read its words, it became apparent this was no typical letter. What Murphy had left behind was unnerving. A confession of activities never admitted to an official record, missions so secret that the men who conducted them were instructed to live, and, if killed, to die, beneath an unbreakable silence. Murphy spoke of ghost campaigns in which victory was tallied not in medals or press announcements but in hiddenness, in which defeat carried not just the cost of death but of oblivion. These paragraphs alone were sufficient to disturb the interpretation of his war service. But the most chilling part of the letter had nothing to do with combat. Rather, it peered into the future. Murphy warned of a future in which America's greatest threat would not be from external forces but from within. He warned that if a country ever forgot the hurt, sacrifice, and wounds borne by its heroes, it would gradually turn to dust. Bravery by itself, he penned, could not redeem a country which abandoned those who had fought and bled for it. His words had the chilling quality of prophecy, as though he predicted a test of remembrance and honor that was still to be faced. Interest soon shifted to the unidentified medal in the box. Its unknown insignia, unusual metalwork, and unusual design caused some historians to speculate it was evidence of Murphy's work for the Cold War operations so clandestine they had never been formally recorded. Others speculated in darker terms, that the medal stood for a secret affiliation, possibly with an undercover unit or experimental program struck from the books. Whatever its significance, it only intensified the enigma of Murphy's legacy. In spite of efforts by military authorities to stifle talk, the news leaked within a matter of hours. Before long, the world was aglow with questions. Why had this container been buried beneath his grave, sealed away for over half a century? What did Audie Murphy take with him to his rest? And most chillingly of all, was his death in 1971 actually what history had recorded? Years went by with the majority accepting the official explanation of Murphy's early demise, a private plane crash on foggy weather over Brush Mountain, Virginia, on May 28, 1971. Rumors of discrepancies never fully dissipated, though. Bystanders at the site remembered strange details, debris strewn in patterns contradictory to impact, flight patterns not matching official logs, and abrupt unexplained radio silence. Alone, such anomalies could be dismissed as fog-induced confusion. But in light of Murphy's buried letter and the relics beneath his grave, suspicion reignited with fresh intensity. Had America's most decorated soldier really perished in a tragic accident, or had he been silenced, his secrets buried until fate unearthed them more than 5 decades later? To grasp why such questions are significant, we need to back away from his tale, into the life of a boy who had nothing and made legendary. Audie Leon Murphy was born on June 20, 1925, in Kingston, Texas. On initial observation, there was little to indicate that this sickly boy would eventually be America's war hero. His family was stuck in poverty, besieged by the Great Depression. His father, Emmett, was unsettled and untrustworthy, frequently disappearing for weeks and leaving his wife Josie with 12 mouths to feed alone. She was a small woman but a big-hearted one, determined to get her children fed through faith, determination, and sheer sacrifice. The Murphys resided in a weathered shack that held together barely in the Texas winds. Food was scarce. Most times, survival meant endless hours of toil in the fields of cotton beneath the scorching sun. Before he was 10 years old, Audie had left school to bear the responsibility, exchanging classrooms for rows of cotton. Small, gaunt, and easily forgotten, he looked like he wasn't cut out for much. But deep within his pale blue eyes a fierce inner strength smoldered, an inner determination that poverty could not vanquish. When World War II broke out, Audie had seen his way of escape. At age 17, standing at little more than 110 pounds, he falsified his age in order to enlist. People mocked the thin lad in uniform, assuming the war would gobble him up. But by January 1945, that same lad was standing in the French woods fighting against terrific odds amidst the German forces. Surrounded and outnumbered, Murphy climbed aboard a burning tank destroyer and, riding that blazing deck, defied more than 200 enemy troops for over an hour. When the battle's smoke had cleared, he was still on his feet, injured but alive, having rescued hundreds of comrades. 33 medals, including the Medal of Honor, were awarded to Murphy by the end of the war. At the age of 19, he was America's most decorated warrior. Back home, Murphy was hailed as the embodiment of an American hero. Hollywood opened its arms to him, and he appeared in over 40 films. His most notable part was as himself in 1955's To Hell and Back, reliving the gruesome battles that had characterized his early life. The film set box office records, and Murphy was both a war hero and a movie star. But behind the glory were shadows. Now we would recognize it as PTSD, but then there was little recognition or care for the emotional wounds of war. Murphy struggled with nightmares, survivor's guilt, and raging tantrums. He married twice, once to actress Wanda Hendricks and again to Pamela Archer, with whom he had 2 children. But even domestic life could not keep the war at bay. Financial difficulties vexed him. Expensive ventures into ranching and oil failed, and gambling losses accumulated. He was arrested in 1970 in a surprise altercation that ended in allegations of assault, though ultimately cleared. To everyone else, he was still a hero, but to himself, he was a man tormented by fights no one else could witness. On May 28, 1971, Murphy flew in a private plane despite thick fog that shrouded Virginia skies. The plane crashed into Brush Mountain several hours later. All on board were killed immediately. He was just 45. The official reason, weather and pilot mistake, had the case closed. However, the excavated artifacts in 2025 made many question again. Was his demise a tragic accident, or was it something else? On June 7, 1971, Audie Murphy was buried in Arlington National Cemetery in full military honors. Thousands showed up. His grave, surrounded by a plain white headstone as he had requested, became one of the most popular attractions at Arlington, behind only President John F. Kennedy's eternal flame. Murphy had not requested any special engravings, even though he had received the Medal of Honor. His stone carried his name alone, service record, and medals, a testament to simplicity and sacrifice. The location became a pilgrimage site over the years. Veterans, families, and average Americans strolled the flagstone walkway constructed for the innumerable visitors who came to offer respects. For more than half a century, the grave was still. Until, in 2025, it spoke again. Aside from the battlefield and Hollywood screen, few were aware of Murphy's secret artistic nature. While he wrote his memoir To Hell and Back, his co-author found fragments of handwritten poetry on Murphy's living room floor. The lines showed a more tender, introspective side of the man who had spent so much of his existence encompassed by brutality. Poems such as The Crosses Grow on Anzio and Freedom Flies in Your Heart Like an Eagle conveyed strong messages of loss, patriotism, and perseverance. One was even translated into song, Dusty Old Helmet, by virtue of his work with songwriter Scott Turner. Murphy co-wrote a number of country songs in the 1960s, including Shutters and Boards and When the Wind Blows in Chicago. Although he was most famous as a soldier and an actor, Murphy's words in poetry and song showed a man struggling with memory, loss, and the burden of sacrifice. Audie Murphy's life is less a history and more a legend. He began in a Texas cotton field and ended as America's most decorated war veteran, a Hollywood star, and a songwriter. But behind the medals and the glory, he bore secrets, scars, and warnings few listened to. The finds under his tomb in 2025, his combat patch, the bizarre medal, and most of all, his creepy handwritten letter, remind us that Murphy's tale is by no means finished. His message was not about war but about memory, duty, and the perils of forgetting the men who give their all. And now, over half a century on, his tomb is greater than that, it is an enigma, a warning, and a provocation. What other secrets have we buried in the depths of history? What other testimonies have we silenced because their accounts were too painful to hear? Audie Murphy's legacy is not merely one of the past. It is a reflection held up to the present, and maybe a warning for the future. His voice, so long believed stilled, now speaks again, reminding us to recall, to remember, and most of all, to listen.